All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Me here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. Kansas, the band, one of my favorite bands of all time, super underrated, super underappreciated. I could do one of those videos about, the war on Kansas, how uh, two songs are played and that's it. That's it. Two songs, Dust in the Wind, Carry On Wayward Son. I'm thinking because it's a Billboard Top 40 thing, or it's a focus testing thing, or it's just ridiculous. Kansas was an album rock band. And if you listen to rock radio growing up, you heard just a ton of music, even when John Elefante took over, who was another great vocalist. Play the Game Tonight, Fight Fire with Fire. But then you have to look at everything prior, those albums with Steve Walsh. And here's the thing. How do you replace Steve Walsh? Well, if you're going to do it, you find a John Elefante. And I'm sure people were like, this guy's lame. But in hindsight, John Elefante was a reasonable replacement for Steve Walsh. Steve Walsh came back to the band, kind of was piloting the thing in the 80s, along with Billy Greer. They came back. Billy Greer was in Streets with him. And they came back to the group and kind of reasserted themselves with a couple of really strong albums in the 1980s. They embraced the sound of the times. Of course, the 90s come along and the whole story. We won't go into that. But Steve Walsh decided to hang it up a few years ago, and they replaced Steve Walsh in Kansas. And I got to tell you, I try really hard to like the new singer. I try really hard to kind of, just say, look, there's only one Steve Walsh. But they replaced Steve Walsh once, and technically that worked. They've done it a second time, and I know there are a lot of really forgiving fans that are devoted to the Kansas sound, to keeping this band, out there. They still tour. I think they've booked dates for this year, and they seem to be like very happy about, where they are right now. And I think that's because maybe Steve Walsh was maybe a little bit more difficult to work with in his later years. I don't know. I know Walsh decided to walk away. There was one interview where the band members were talking about how they needed to like the person. Like the person who joined had to be somebody they could hang out with and have a beer with and so forth. And I'm thinking, you replace a legend, all right, for a second time, by the way. And I think your standard has to be a little higher than, can we have a beer with this guy? Now, maybe some people think the new singer is just as good. I detect like a little bit of, Steve Walsh sang from way down in. And I don't know, I'm not a professional singer. I will say that, but I use my ears and I hear things and I go, there's something that's more nasal, more, it's less diaphragm, and it's more, it seems to be up higher. And the new guy, can he hit notes? Yeah, he hits notes. They're not quite as sharp as the way Walsh used to hit them. And by the way, Steve Walsh used to hit those notes even in the later years. His voice had changed a lot, but he was still bringing it at every concert. And you could watch him on stage and you could tell his whole being was being thrown into that. Just an incredible vocalist, even, I think approaching age 70 at the time, or late 60s, he was just still on point. He just, again, if you listen to early Steve Walsh and, later Steve Walsh, you can hear that his vocal cords had probably taken a bit of a beating, but guess what? He was still in the ballpark, and it was still legitimate that he would front that band. So when you replace Steve Walsh, I think you have to look a little further and maybe take a little more time, Now, the band's recorded 2 studio albums since that, and they've leaned really hard on their super prog roots. And when I say super prog, at times they can be a real proggy band, but at other times they can be like a bar band playing R&B with a Midwestern thing going on. And then at other times they can write pop songs and then put the Kansas touch on those songs. So there's kind of a wide array of what they did. It isn't just the proggy stuff that matters to fans. I think it's the whole enchilada, you know, and leaning hard on the prog stuff to say, hey, we're Kansas. We've always been a prog band. Kansas has also been a radio band, you know, just because, you know, radio stations today lean on just 2 tracks doesn't necessarily mean that the band in their heyday didn't have a lot more stuff, especially over on rock radio, which has completely abandoned all of the music from the 70s and 80s that was on rock stations. They just don't play it, and nobody does for that matter. You have to go and search out internet formats or special formats to even get a little taste of that. But I mean, they're redoing Point of No Return as a live album. They're putting this out, Point of No Return live with a new guy singing. Why would I want to do that? 2 for the Show is out there, right? Brilliant live album with Steve Walsh singing. Now I get it. It's interesting. There's a curiosity factor where you might want to listen and see if they can still pull this off. On one of, I think the first one of these that they recorded, I know they did some overdubbing on Carry On Wayward Son. I mean, I know it. You can hear it. And a bunch of people said, hey, it sounds like they just put a vocal in there that didn't exist in the live performance. And I worry that this is the future for rock bands who used to be able to do this stuff without a lot of extra help. And now they're relying on that extra help. And people are thinking, oh, this is a live album. Well, it's a live album with tons. Now, I'm not saying live albums in the past didn't have overdubs on them, but a lot of them didn't. A live album was really cheap to record. You just play and record and run it through a stereo mixing board, and you got yourself, and you might have to reposition some of the instruments to make it sound like full spectrum, but it's still a really cheap way to get some new material out there, or at least to get live material out to an audience that might want to hear what this sounds like live. I'm wondering if this isn't just another like doctored live album, but put that aside. It may be mostly recorded the way it was played and so forth. And maybe there are a few little brush strokes here and there, airbrushing some of the imperfections out of it. I'm just more concerned about the vocals. I mean, when you replace Steve Walsh, it's just even more difficult in a live setting, knowing what Steve Walsh could do live. I mean, and I'm not, believe me, I'm one of those guys that if you find the right singer and you've got some new material, or you're just, you know, you're got some new energy, thanks to that. I don't think this singer is providing the band a lot of energy. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this is, you know, it's just the inevitable thing that these franchises will continue on. And I'm just saying, I think you needed to do a little bit more of a search. I've mentioned Jerome Mazza, haven't talked about him in a while. He is obviously the most logical choice to be their singer. I guess he missed it by that much, you know, a little Get Smart analogy, which I haven't used in a while. But, you know, once you make a choice, you make a choice, you make a commitment, and it's hard, I guess, to go back on that commitment, and I understand. But if you go listen to some Jerome Mazza music, and he's part of a band called Pinnacle Point. They've put out 2 albums. Their second album came out last year, and it was like number 2 or 3 on my list of great albums for the year. It was just this majestic, perfectly sung hitting all the points about how great Kansas was. In other words, it wasn't just leaning on prog, it was leaning on pop, it was leaning on a mixture of things which created that sound. And in any event, that's who I would have picked. And again, you could have even searched for more candidates. I'm sure there would have been some voices out there that could have held those notes and had a deep, rich sound rather than just kind of a singular, sort of a higher nasally kind of delivery, which for some people, it's not a distraction. It's like, to me, you know, you can be distracted by things and you could say, okay, the music's great, but I'm not, something about this just doesn't work. And you may not realize right away what it is. For me, I knew right away about these vocals. I said, yeah, it's okay, but nope, it's just, and by the way, I would put John Elefante ahead of their current singer. John Elefante, a different style vocal, pretty much a cleaner, not as soulful voice, I would say Elefante had. Not quite as much soul in it, but clean and full and big and powerful. And those are the attributes you need to be the lead vocalist for the band Kansas. So that's my video. You may not agree with me on this. I have a few folks that follow me who are diehard Kansas fans, and they're kind of in agreement with me. They wanted, you know, to give the benefit of the doubt. Nobody wants to throw anybody under the bus here. That's not my intent. My intent here is to say, I really want to still love my band from my childhood. And again, I had these guys' albums when I was like 11, 12 years old, 13 years old, and I was buying these albums that I cherished. I mean, just staring at the records and the sleeves and looking at all the liner notes and the artwork. And I mean, this was really great marketing, and it continues even now. All of that imagery is still intact. It's just the vocals are not. The vocals are not the same. And I miss those powerhouse vocals from Walsh and to some extent even John Elefante. So that's my video on this topic. Again, check me out over on Patreon if you want to subscribe for $1 a month. Also, what else? Oh, subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell if you want to get notifications on new videos. Until next time, I'm Dave, Harmless Dave, saying have yourself a great day, or whatever time of day you see this video, whatever time that is, have a great portion of that day.